everyone, Gemma here from the Online College of Art and Design. Hope everyone's keeping safe and well. I'm going to do a tutorial today on observation. There's been a lot of people sending messages and sending in their work, so thanks so much for sharing that with us and myself. A lot of questions coming through on how do I improve my drawing, how do I get it more accurate. So we did do a still life last time, but I thought I'd go back to what I call task 1, because task 1 is how we learn how to see things and how to actually observe. So I'm going to take it back a step. So we're going back to step 1, task 1. You can start here, but you can start on any task really. But if you want to understand how observation works and how you learn to see things more accurately, I'm going to hopefully give you an insight into how we do that and what the tricks are to improve your art. So all you need to get really are some simple line drawings. Now everything I'm going to show you today you can get off Google Images really easily. So I have printed this off. I just typed in simple bird line drawing, okay, and got this. So this is just a nice simple line drawing to help with the basics of observation. So if we wanted to copy this image and have it as accurate as possible, what you're seeing is obviously you can see it's a bird. And when you can recognise an object or a thing, it's the left side of your brain that's working because it's telling you that it's a bird. It's the things that are logical, things that make sense, names of things. That's the left side of your brain. So you see a bird. Now what's going to be really hard is when you draw something that you can recognise as something and the left side of your brain is telling you what it is, it can actually make it very difficult to observe something because you think you know what a bird looks like, and it would be the same if it was an eye on a face or a nose. Some people say it's very hard to draw a realistic eye. But what is actually happening is you're drawing with the left side of your brain, okay? And a lot of people find it very hard to switch over to the right, whereas other people might find using the right side of their brain quite easy. So it's not always a case of, oh, I just can't draw. It's being able to understand how your brain's actually working and seeing an object. So what we do at OCAD is one of the first tasks I get students to do is to turn their picture upside down. Now what you're trying to do in turning something upside down is stop the left side of your brain from thinking about it. So now you don't see a bird, okay? Now hopefully you just see shapes and lines. Okay, now some people can look at it this way and ignore the fact that it's a bird and actually just see shapes and lines as well. But the idea is if you turn it upside down, this becomes a bit easier, okay, because you can see now that they are just obvious shapes. Now artists talk about positive and negative spaces. So the lines on this drawing are your positive spaces, and you could even argue that these shapes in between are as well. This is your positive space, okay? But I'm going to break it down and just say the lines are positive space, okay? So that's your drawing, where the lines are. Now if you just ignore parts of the drawing, you'll see that there's a shape here, like a funny cone shape. Okay, now this is what you're trying to do when you're observing. You reduce any picture or any object that you are looking at when you are drawing to shapes and lines. This is the right side of your brain, Okay, so when you are drawing, you're not trying to see the whole object, you're trying to see sections of it, and you're trying to break it down into all the different shapes and spaces between lines, all the curves, all the angles. And when you start to observe in that way, you do feel it, and you do start to feel yourself looking for, you know, the distances and these shapes. And when I draw this bird, I'll actually be drawing this cone type shape here. I won't be drawing a bird. I won't be drawing, you know, just the whole thing and ignoring the fact that there are lots of different shapes. There's like a little bit of a odd semicircle here. So this is what you're observing, okay? All of the different shapes. You break everything down. That is how you observe, and it takes practice, okay? So when people say, I can't draw, it's possibly because you're seeing things very literally, and when you're drawing, your left side of your brain is telling you it's an eye, it's a hand, it's a cup, it's a vase. But if you take those thoughts away, you end up being able to see shapes and lines. Things like listening to music, which a lot of people love to do while they're drawing and things, if it's got lyrics and you're kind of singing along, you're actually getting the left side of your brain active, because you're thinking in words and, you know, your literal things. So this is why a lot of artists you might hear them say, put classical music on, put music that has no words to it, make sure you're not disturbed and you're in a quiet space. All of these techniques are going to help build the right side of your brain and help you to think and see things that are shapes and lines and not the literal thing. So hopefully that is making some sense to you, and hopefully that's giving you an understanding of how to build on your observational drawing, okay? So if I'm going to copy this bird, now you can do it this way and you can draw upside down. I think you will get better results if you do, okay? Or you can draw it the right way, because when you are practiced in the right side of your brain, you'll be able to see lines and shapes. You probably see artists holding their thumb up and, you know, doing measurements and distances. But that's what they're doing. They're making that image just distances and maths and, you know, angles, because that's what the object is when you're drawing it. It's not a cup and saucer or a vase, as I say, or a jug, okay? So let me just get some willow charcoal so I can draw nice and big so you can see. So you want to just follow and look at the curves. Okay, so maybe this line first, just this one, ignore everything else, don't think about what it is, just draw this. So you can think it's a bit flat, little bit of a curve, swoops down into a bit of a vertical, and then it kind of is going down gradually to a nice flat bit there. So this shape here, we want to try to replicate, okay? So bit of a curve, goes down flat, something like that. Okay, that's this bit here. Okay. Now we can look at the next bit, and this is where we can start looking at shape. So this whole negative space in here, okay, just look at that shape, look at the angles. And bring it right down through there. Okay. Now we can start to look at these conical shapes. This one here. So that's kind of the shape that's here, isn't it, there? And you can compare just those different shapes to kind of improve your drawing. I've drawn this so many times. Okay, so roughly I've deduced it to just these different shapes. Okay, and it takes practice, so you can keep going with things like this and getting some different line drawings. Now I want to show you a couple more techniques. So a simple line drawing can get you started, but by all means turn everything upside down and do it that way, so you're just looking at shapes, because it's always nice then when you turn it back round and you realise, oh, actually I can draw. It does actually look quite good. Okay, so there's your simple one. Now the one that we do at OCAD is a bit more complicated. It's this one, a horse. Now people who feel they can't draw or observe might look at that line drawing and think, wow, that is actually quite difficult to draw something like that. The left side of your brain is telling you it's a horse. It's got legs, there's a mane, there's a tail, there's a face. Your left side of your brain is going to go a bit crazy when you're drawing this, because it's going to be telling you all the features that you are actually working on, okay? So this is the one that we can turn upside down, okay, and hopefully ignore, okay, that it's a horse, and try and look at lines. Now a lot of students, let me just get a clean page so it's a bit clearer to see. Let me get a piece of paper. Some students like to do it this way, because you can still see the whole thing, and a lot of students will look at this as a whole image. But what you've got to try and do is just ignore that it's a horse. Give yourself a little starting point. So there you go, maybe something like that, and draw those shapes onto your page. Just draw that. And when that's done, you can add a few more shapes. You can see lots of negative spaces are created. I'll say between the legs, so you know what I mean, but you don't want to be thinking legs, because you just want to be looking at the shapes. So you might just want to draw that bit, and you keep going, adding all of these shapes as you go and lines, and you will be surprised how good it is when you turn your drawing the right way. So because you've used the right side of your brain. Now, that is still, for a beginner in drawing, may be difficult. And you might find that when you turn it the other way and you start to see all the shapes that are in between, okay, you might be able to spot things that didn't go to plan, okay, and it still may be out of proportion. Okay, so maybe when you drew this line, you didn't measure this line compared to the back here, or you didn't compare this line to the difference between this one here. So there's a lot of measuring involved. If I've done the foot this big, or this circular shape here, what is that difference compared to this one? Is this circular shape bigger or smaller than this one? If this is the foot, or a circle here, how does it compare with the curved line here? Is this one bigger than this, and by how much? So you're constantly comparing your proportions as you go. Otherwise, you might end up with a really large face, okay, and really small legs, or really long legs and a really squashed body. So you kind of want to be measuring as you go along. Go, okay, so if that shape is that long, the body is about the same again. And you can look at the levels as well. Where does this line end and this one begin? Is it slightly below? Is it in line? Is this line here in line with, I'll say, the eye here? So you constantly are looking for shapes and distances and where things are in relation to each other. And it doesn't really matter at this stage if you start too big on these curves here and you run out of space on the page, okay? Because you're just practicing. If you run out of space but it's in proportion, then you're observing good, aren't you? Okay, so that's kind of a hard one to do if you just go straight into it, okay? So you want to print off an image, and again, you can type in upside down line drawing horse, and this will come up in Google, because it's not a new thing. It's not our invention. It's a known way of learning to observe, and many students will do this. Printing it a bit smaller, but making it bigger on your page is a really good practice also, because you're scaling up, okay? You might want to do it exactly the same, so you've measured everything, but ideally you'll be copying something and making it your own scale, okay? But I have another technique for that, so let me show you. This is called the grid method, okay? So I've put a grid now on the horse, as you can see. They are perfect squares. Now this is what's important with the grid method. So this distance here and this one here is the same. So this is a square, okay? And it doesn't matter what scale that square is. When I draw it in here, as long as I've got a perfect square as well, okay, then it's going to match up. They can be rectangular, but then obviously you've got a bit of maths to work it out. You've got to do the same proportions but bigger on your page. So I kind of always stick to squares because they're easy, okay? So you would draw a big grid of 2 squares by 3 squares to fill your page here. And the idea is you again will reduce this. Let me get 2 pieces of paper. You are now going to reduce this whole image of a horse down to just 1 square. You'll see in children's colouring books and things like that, these techniques where you have to copy across to a grid. I'm sure you've all seen them. But if you do it like this, then you've got more lines and more negative space to observe where in relation to this square everything falls. So this line here, where does it end? Is that about 1/3 of the way? 2/3 into this square is where that line is. So you can actually have more measurements and more guidance with a grid. And again, if this is turned upside down, you've got that added thing that you won't be seeing a tail, let's say. If this is still very difficult for you, you can split this up even smaller and you can do an even smaller grid, okay? And you could end up with 4 squares going across the top of your page, okay? And then you could be looking at even smaller sections of the drawing. Okay, so when you've got a square that's about there, you're only looking at these lines. So it's even easier. So the grid method is a great technique for scaling up because you can have a small image and you can make it much bigger, okay? But also it's good for observation, for practicing seeing measurements and seeing distances between lines. So I really recommend the grid method if you're really struggling with proportion and seeing things. And it's about training the right side of your brain. Just like any craft, the more practice and the more training, the better your observations. And you will get to the point where you can look at an object or a drawing like this and copy it, okay? And a lot of people want to get to that stage. They want to get to the stage where they can see a still life or see an illustration and replicate it exactly, okay? So if you're worried about proportion or quality of actual observation, these techniques are really going to help you. Now I'm going to help you with one more thing, okay? And it is still to do with the grid method, okay? What I've done is I've cut out 6 squares, okay? Let's move this. This is another thing you can do. So I've cut out 6 squares, okay, of paper. They're all of equal size. They're all much bigger than the original grid, as you can see. And what I've done is I've copied each one onto a piece of paper. So by doing this, I have not been able to see this as a whole image of a horse. All I've been able to see is this 1 square down in this bottom corner. Okay, so this square here I have drawn. So I've copied over the proportions. I've looked at which circle is about halfway here. Okay, I've made sure my negative space matches this as much as possible. I've got the distances between the top and you know these these gaps in between. Just try to copy it exact as much as I can across. So that square can now go down here, okay? And you can do these in any order, and you can do them upside down or, you know, whichever way you want. So you can copy across the lines. Let me find this one. Here it is. So there's that square that I've copied across. Okay, just following all the lines, looking at all the negative spaces. Okay. And what you're doing by doing this is literally breaking down this image into 6 pictures that actually, when you piece it together, when you're done, you'll actually have the whole image. And it should all be in proportion. You could do this with any line drawing, anything that's quite complicated. And when you look at it together, you can see how closely you've been able to observe your drawing. And you can do this with anything. You could do it with a still life photo, you can do it with a portrait, and you can teach yourself how to observe more accurately. And just piecing it together, you could do something really quite complicated like this. And you can see it's scaled up, okay? So it's got bigger, but it's still absolutely in proportion, okay? So these are all my techniques to help you build up the right side of your brain, how to observe accurately. This is always useful because when you come to actually piece the pieces together, you can see where things don't quite match up. And you can see where you might have done a bit of a mistake. If these legs weren't to match up, oh, okay, well, where did I go wrong? Is it this square that's kind of over too much, over to one side, to the right, or is it the one below? And you can join them up afterwards, okay? But that's another technique. So at OCAD, these are the things that we get students to do to practice their observations. As I say, it's task 1. It's right at the beginning to actually get you ready for observations. And those that get really confident that the right side of their brain is working, here's Stravinsky by Picasso. You could try something like that. Something that when you first look at it, you might think there is no way I could observe and draw that. But put all of these methods together, turn it upside down. You might get a piece of paper and just start drawing it line by line. That's easy now. You could get those lines in proportion to begin with. Then bring it down and do the next lines. Just you can see when you turn it upside down that is just now shapes and lines. There's nothing complicated about it, okay? And you can just keep going. And it does get complicated because you will still see features where the left side of your brain will be telling you, oh, that's a hand. There's fingernails, you know, and it'll trick you into not actually looking at the shapes, but to draw a hand. And this is where you've just got to be careful, okay? But you could do this bit by bit, and then, honestly, by the time you've turned around your drawing, most of our students are amazed that they were able to copy something that actually looked quite complicated. If you're still struggling with proportion, use the grid method. It helps you. The more squares you have, the more sections this is broken down into for you, and you can see more shapes and lines and angles, okay? So good luck with training the right side of your brain. I hope it's been helpful and you will enjoy doing this. Find any line drawing really. We were finding different types of illustration, different Disney characters, anything that you want to learn how to draw, that you want to, you know, copy over. The horse and Picasso are just good ones. This is a very popular one for understanding the upside down right side of your brain observation. This is what you'll find on Google Images to do with that technique. But this is a great one that we give the students to then really show us if they've been able to train the right side of their brain. So that's it from me. Good luck with your observational drawing. Have a go, because then when we do more observations with these tutorials, when we're doing still lifes or even portraits, if you've got these skills in place, you're going to have better outcomes, because these are your contour drawings, and you must always have these right before you even start considering shading and actually getting tone into your work. If you haven't got the right proportions and the right contours to begin with, then adding shading is just going to highlight those, awkward proportions or perspectives that you've tried to draw. So this is very important. Take away all shading, take away all tone, and just practice lines, because at the end of the day, that's what every object is when you start to draw it. Okay, so thanks everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you want to send in any of your examples, and from now, if anyone is asking, how do I improve my observation, have a go at this and post it, and then post your drawing again, and you'll see that there is a marked improvement, I promise, because this is how it works. So have a good week. I'll be in touch again. We'll put another video on soon. Yeah, take care of yourselves, and I'll tune in again very soon. Bye for now.